I wanted to talk today a little bit with my friend Rob, who is a hacker and a security expert, because we'd both been discussing how far we've come from the days where the motto was Google saying "Don't be evil," and I think that was indication that maybe something was afoot even at that time. But we've come a long way from not expecting any evil from big tech to seeing, well, I'd love to get your opinion, but to seeing that they're constantly sort of creeping in, taking information and sort of giving these enormous EULAs that no one can read. And it seems like a lot of privacy is being lost. So you and I were having a very interesting conversation like a week or so ago, and you had done a huge amount of research on Discord itself. And I'd love to hear more about what you found and the detail that in which you discovered that a lot of information was being sort of funneled off from users. So what do you say about that?
Sure, yes. A bit about our conversation, I think, was involving how, in order to keep your privacy, you have to not use these services.
Yeah,
If you use them, you give up a lot. Um, and it's not very clear what you're giving up by the wording just as written in the
exactly.
terms of service.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's not so easy to opt out. It's very easy. I've seen people say, well, you don't have to use them. Well, you don't have to use Facebook, but no one's using a landline anymore or meeting in big places, right? They're using Facebook. And then if you don't use it, you go to something else, but then they don't have any rules on privacy either. And it turns out to be this system wide sort of lack of protection for the user. And you don't have to use anything, but you could also live in a cave and not do anything. So you kind of do have to use them, right? Some subset of them, or else you're just not even able to live a full life anymore in a lot of senses, right?
I'd agree, and it's not the decision for everyone, but it could be argued I live a less full life because I do not participate on Facebook, do not
Yeah.
see the party invites until I see the person in friend and we discuss about what happened afterward.
Right. I
So,
missed it. I didn't hear. Right.
mhm,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
with Discord, as you said, it is being used everywhere, particularly as a support forum,
Mhm.
where a community can support itself and a company can also funnel resources toward support of that community for open source project. Even commercial companies are using Discord, support of hardware products,
Yeah.
almost anything. It's very easy to find, join our Discord to have a conversation. And so there's a lot of support and knowledge that is essentially behind I don't have a better word other than paywall, where you pay with your privacy by joining.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a cost that I think a coin that people don't see. They see things are free and it's like, oh, this is a party. This thing is free. But that it's been true for a long time that if you don't see a cost, you are paying. You're the product, and your information is what you're paying with. And the information is all privacy, right? It's all the details about you. People say, oh, I'm not interesting, or no one will care about me. Well, they might not care about you at the moment, but the whole point of getting everybody's information is to then make a model of the system, right? Of society or some whatever group you're in. And then a lot of parameters will be assigned to you, like, oh, you're part of this subgroup, you're I don't want to name a group, hackers, or you're French, whatever. And then you will be corralled into some small bubble or subgroup. And that as that gets increasingly refined, that is more and more of an encroachment of the individual's privacy. And I think people don't see that coming. And
Yeah.
I think it's ferociously good, actually. There's someone else, Naomi Brockwell, did a video on that Google and YouTube are so good with how they can target advertising or your preferences or what videos you want to see next, that they actually hold back and they throw in some noise, right? Some suggestions that aren't so good, because in the early tests when they were spot on, and this is like 3 or 4 years ago, people were so freaked out that they didn't like to use the service. So to hide something that's alarming to people instead of discontinuing it is really not following the wishes of the consumer. The consumer was telling them clearly, we don't like this, and they just barreled right on. They just hit it. They just hide with their
Comparison to Discord is Slack, and I want to bring them up to highlight another issue specific to cloud service providers, which has also come up in the news recently, is that they view security as an upsell. So in the news recently has been the news about the government military, their Office 365 email getting hacked, and the only way that the attack could have been found is with access to the logs that come at the highest tier that they
wow.
sell.
Wow.
Otherwise, you have no way of catching this information. Now, based on this, Microsoft is implementing a change. I think next quarter, they've promised to make those logs available to everybody, all of their customers. But this is going back
Because they got
to
caught red-handed.
yes. Well,
Speak, right.
it's not so much that they were caught red-handed. They always knew the value of those logs. It is really just the appearance that security can't really be an upsell. A customer can have a shared responsibility model of protecting their own data when the service provider is not providing them the information they need to do their own due diligence as a customer. Slack is
That's
another
important.
example of this,
Yeah,
where they offer a free subscription to nonprofits, but again, no logs. It is not a full subscription as if you were
right.
actually a paying customer. So even for a nonprofit wanting to take up of that service, this free gift is almost somewhat of a Trojan horse, because you adopt this service that really becomes, in many cases, critical to the functioning of an organization, and they don't have proper visibility into the security of it. And the security visibility is requires that even as a nonprofit, they pay full price.
Right. And that is very well put. And I think it's a subtle point that's essential. Like these companies are corralling information, keeping it for themselves, and not giving it to corporations, nonprofits, as you were saying, and hiding that they weren't giving it. As far as I know, a lot of companies wouldn't be aware and weren't made aware of the fact that they weren't getting, as you said, all the information that they need to do their own due diligence, and that there's something deeply wrong with a corporate model, where the companies, the big tech companies that have all this power, can actually withhold something that you need when you're using their services. So the power structure is off. The payoff tables are not balanced between the user and the provider, in my opinion. So, and there's so many examples of this.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and to your
Yeah.
point of users not being aware of it, I think unfortunately, um, uh, when the information isn't there and isn't available,
Yeah.
it's they can more or less stick their heads in the sand and assume that the service provider is taking care of these security issues for them, when really they don't realize they're in this position of they have this responsibility, but they're not being provided the internal data that the system has and is generating, that are required for them to do their due diligence for their own
Right.
security.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really important point. So tell me more. You sent me a bunch of really interesting information, a bunch of links about other reports on how Discord was insecure and did things that compromised the user's privacy. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that? And I intend, with your assistance, to post your group of links to anyone who's interested. In the box below, as people do. Right, the links will be
Yes.
here. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you for asking and setting this up. my background in having those links on Discord came about because I was invited to participate in a private community that was on a private Discord server, and I was concerned about the security implications of joining this system, and that there were compromises that were required that weren't part of the alternative that we had available to us. That was basically a privately run server. So I was looking into how the platform ran, read their privacy policy, and looking at their business model. And at first, I had a bit of false sense of, well, maybe this is okay by looking at their business model, which seemed to be that they got their money from community users that would that would sponsor the private servers that they were members of, essentially adding capabilities to the private server. So, that usually, if your customers are directly paying you, that goes a long way towards having proper incentives as opposed to your
Yeah, if
users
it's
being the
true.
product. Um,
Right.
so, shortly after that, we were using Discord, and there were uh, they then decided to update their privacy policy as the AI boom was starting to ramp up, and really left the door wide open to. I think specifically they got rid of a promise that they were not going to keep and use recordings.
And how many users would notice that, by the way? Right? People that are already using it, it's like, oh yeah, they adjusted the policy, but I'm already using this, I'll keep going. So that's also something that happens. There's this mission creep, so to speak. But so go ahead. And it's a huge deal that they're keeping recordings, right? Whether you record or not, they're keeping their stream of it.
Yes. So the wording, as I've read it after that update, is that they generally do not keep recordings. And the definition of what generally is or is not is left undefined. Um, so, you generally don't train an AI, but when we do, we use your recordings.
Yeah. Kind of like
When.
the Carnivore Project, right, from the 90s. Like we generally don't impinge on citizens' phone conversations, but when we do, when we need to do something with it, we'll just get this massive amount of depersonalized data to do with as we wish. And
Hmm.
people didn't know they were participating in that either. There was no EULA for that.
Hmm.
But Snowden, we wouldn't have known if it wasn't for Snowden. But I digress a little bit. I'm sorry. Back to you.
Sure. It's a good point that you usually need some kind of whistleblower to really know what's fully going on. So you almost sort of have to feel around by what is out there in the news to sort of get an understanding of what's happening inside the organization. Uh, so um, uh, I kind of made a prediction that Discord was going to be a security nightmare. And, within a period of 90 days, just all these things happened that proved it right. So the first one being the change in the terms of service regarding recordings and what they'll do with them, when they have them, how long they keep them. All of that is sort of a black box at this point, but they do make and keep recordings. That is at least admitted to. Um, then there was the Discord security leaks, where there was someone in the military who had access to classified information and was leaking it on a private Discord server. What I found interesting in that was that there was a lot of information coming from the press. The Washington Post made a Discord leaks um, section of their site dedicated to this topic, but they were interviewing multiple members of uh, this Discord server and Discord servers where information was leaked, and who knew the original leaker and were able to find them, interview them, write a story, have that story fact checked by places like the Washington Post, where that stuff takes time. And all of this was able to happen in parallel to a law enforcement investigation where they had not even arrested the target yet, but were well on their way to. So, what this tells me is that I don't think law enforcement was really leaking this information to the press,
Mhm.
that this information was coming from Discord itself.
And how was the information discovered or found by external people? You know, you said it was military information that was being discussed on a private channel. How did it get out of the private channel? Was it Discord itself?
Oh no, that was just the members. They would, of course, be parts of multiple channels and would just share the data on a different channel. And then it wasn't that everything became public all at once, but pieces of what was being leaked on that original channel were being
Mhm.
leaked, a different piece by a different member here, a different piece by a different member there, and then eventually
People
leading to
started
the
to
point where
assemble.
they put it together, right, and realized that where this was originally coming from, and then of course, it was out that this leak was happening through Discord. Um, as all these news articles were being written, it seemed that many news organizations had their own sources uh, uh, to get this information within Discord that included the capability of them to contact members of these Discord channels and perform interviews, and that all these news organizations seem to have independent sources. So, like, there were many leaks from
Yeah, so
Discord.
it's like Swiss cheese.
Right.
So, yeah. So far, I mean, one of the things that we know are that what happens on Discord is not private. If the videos and the audio is scraped for whatever use they want, I mean, they can say it's to train their AI or to improve, but once it's scraped, we all know that the information is sold by companies to subsidiaries, or it goes to some place where any permission you give doesn't or don't give doesn't follow the information. That's been going on for decades. I mean, there's been information capture for decades in various places, even electronic health records, or Facebook, all kinds of things. So that was being captured, used, and possibly sold, and I would say almost definitely sold. And then this information that people are trading on channels about Discord and possibly other topics is also kind of transferring externally. And I don't know what their security issues are, so maybe you'll speak to that, like
Hmm.
exactly how that got out. But
Yes.
sometimes I feel like people want an enormous story. Like Facebook is bad, and then they want reams of information. And I think sometimes it's really simple. You go on this video platform, you talk like a phone call, right? You expect it to be private. Hello, we're talking about this, and then we're going to hang up, and then you expect it to disappear. And the fact that that information is ever stored and captured and then used, besides on top for all these different reasons, to me, that's enough. Like, it takes 3 minutes to tell that. People want to go to court and they want documents. I kind of feel like people need too much proof that these things are not what we think they are. The moment, I mean, 20, 30 years ago, if I said to you, hey, your phone at home, right? There's no Facebook, there's no computers. Your phone at home? Yeah, Regina, I know the phone at home. When you talk on it, the government's listening. Boom. Or Procter and Gamble is listening, whatever. Like, I'm done. There's a problem. Something has to be fixed with the phone. They don't need to do anything more than just be listening. So people have sort of lost their ability to focus, I think, on the fact that their information and privacy is valuable, and then to understand that all you need to know is that it's not being kept, but the promise is not being kept by these companies. And I feel that that's maybe something that's education, that maybe people just don't know what's happening with this information.
Yeah, the I think there's a lot going on there. There's, as you mentioned, people that are just told, well, your recording, your meetings, your private meetings are potentially being recorded and kept, is not enough. Like that's one group. But
Yeah.
there's more going on that is an issue with Discord, even beyond that. Another news issue that has come out is essentially um, association. People are using Discord
Oh,
for very, very bad things. And the history that you've joined or been a part of a Discord channel uh, could predate that use, but you then have potentially this permanent association that you could get caught up in. Um,
like accidentally join, you mean?
or just a group is
Or change?
repurposed. Yeah, a new group
Oh,
of
yeah.
people come into a private server, and all of a sudden the content just goes in a direction that the original creator never intended. But the original creator is gone. And I mean, if you were going to have a nefarious Discord server, I mean, you wouldn't want to create it yourself. You would ideally want to take over something that was created by somebody else and that you inherited and that you had less direction in, but somehow gained the ability to steer and administer. So there's various kinds of dark markets and things for sale that are going on in these Discord channels that, yeah, you again, it could have been innocent when you joined, but you're potentially you never know. Hey, this was a boring channel. You dropped out, and now it has new owners. A potential future law enforcement investigation. You could get swept up in that. There's news that these investigations are happening, and that with the previous classified document. Discord leaks reporting that law enforcement is just a subpoena away from getting essentially any information they want from Discord.
Yeah. That's a huge can of worms that you just introduced. And I think that's a really important thing. So, first of all, that the groups can be changed, but you're still associated with it. But also those association maps. I've heard people like Rob Braxman.
Hmm.
I know that you called him the man who screams at the clouds or something, and it's good. But he's full of information,
Hmm.
and he's really great. And one of the things he's described in detail is how Facebook and your phone keeps the information of who your contacts are, and because everybody has a different constellation of contacts, it seems innocent. It's just my phone book. Who cares about my address book? It's a kind of amazing how you can draw these maps of connections between people. And you pointed out the inverse issue. Whereas, what if you accidentally one time called someone who's a criminal or something? Now you're in their network, right? And you can be implicated in something. And then there's been action on that. There's a new law. I can't cite it right now, but the IRS made a new law last year or 2 years ago where if you're under investigation for any kind of financial fraud, without informing, and this I actually looked this up, and it's it's written by like in their charter. I guess that's not the right word, but it's written down as a regulation or a rule or something that all Americans are subject to. They can investigate anyone that they can deem that you've been in touch with without informing that person that they're being investigated, because they're the IRS. They have all the records. Now it's all electronic. So you can have a deep dive with a suspicious eye done to your finances by the IRS, who, but last I heard, is nobody's best friend, for a reason that is just because you had an association with someone that maybe you don't know that they're doing something really criminal. All you had that happened is you went to a bake sale with your kid, and they go to the same school or something, completely innocent. So these associations are enormously important, and we don't even know they're being kept.
So again, going back to the Discord leaks, uh, this the reasons for sharing this information in Discord was funny. Um, it was because it had to do with wargaming and with basically information on weapon systems in reference to how they were in the games, and almost kind of making points on arguments
Huh.
within the game. And so it was to support their statements that essentially this information was getting to support their arguments in these channels, that these documents were given as reference. From there, they would then be cited on other private channels by users that saw them, and this information traveled. But
Yeah.
this is classified information, and the people
Mm.
who were getting this, maybe because it supported an argument, who never should have seen it in the first place, are now in the position where they are sharing classified information to other channels, possibly without even realizing the legal implications of that action. Without malicious intent, doesn't make it any less illegal. Doesn't make them
Right.
any less potentially in scope for an investigation. But this is just one example that has just occurred recently, where people, if they recorded a session in Discord or streamed it, and it was something where a classified document came up. Again, you could, any kind of restricted content, you sort of have no real control over that,
Right.
what gets presented and thrown at you. But yes, now you've supposedly been exposed to this material, and that potentially means you could have then the capability to reshare it. So of course we need to
Yeah.
investigate your history to rule out that you haven't.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's a problem with the internet in general. You know that we've built, we, not me, the big tech has built these platforms that actually leverage huge, grandma can be sharing a recipe on a live stream on Facebook, but it could go to a billion people. And if she accidentally shares a classified document in it, I mean, I totally made that scenario up. But and then she's investigated, and meanwhile, it's just be for some innocent reason that I can't think of, because she's sharing a recipe. But the leverage is the number of people. If you're sharing it and you're giving a talk and you've accidentally put, I don't know, something classified in a seminar because you found it at the library, maybe 30 people will see it. And eventually you'll figure out that it's not, you shouldn't have had whatever that information is, and you'll take it out. And no one will have a copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it would die out like a forest fire in a forest that's not very dense will burn in a small area and then die out. But if you've got all these interconnections, the fire will keep burning, right? It'll burn through all the brush and everything, and you'll get this enormous blaze like Canada. And you will have no control over who's connected to the information, even though they may not even be aware of how they're connected to it. And they're putting that problem back on the user when it's really a scaling problem that has to do with the platforms and how they built them.
I
So
don't know if
I
it's
don't know if
if it's
that's where you're
considered
going.
a scaling problem. I I don't think scaling is the problem. I think it's by design, because we haven't even brought in the data brokers, where information that is supposedly de-anonymized is
Well, yeah.
shared and then easily de-anonymized when it's.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, yeah, that's enormous. And I'll let you talk a bit to that, but people have no idea how simple it is to identify de-anonymize or anonymize data. It's crazy. But what was your perspective on that?
Well, it is that the collection of all this data is done on purpose. It's not a problem with
I
the
see.
platform.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is done on
And
purpose.
a study was done, I don't know, in Holland or some small place where they were trying to find the minimum amount of information you'd need to undo the anonymization of medical data. And it was way less than people expected. Like the scientists thought they would need, I don't remember how they measured it, but certainly like to collect maybe 100, I made up a number, but some large amount of auxiliary information in order to correlate. And it turned out to be like five different things, and they were able to identify the group of people like exactly. And I think with three things they could identify everyone in the study, which was millions of people, like with it over 85% accuracy. So that's just three. So think of how much it's kind of like a fingerprint. I don't mean a biological fingerprint, but in the computer science sense, that you don't need that many parameters of the fingerprint in order to get information on what you're trying to identify. And people don't realize it. They think, oh, it's anonymized. They'll never know it's me. Yeah, they will. In fact, one of the biggest, this is out of nowhere and has nothing to do with Discord, but one of the biggest data points to re-identify medical data was your gait, the way you walk, which was collected from your smartphone. Right? People give that up all the time. It's part of the initial EULA. Even if you don't count your steps, the phone not only counts your steps but counts your gait, which is like a very unique kind of way, however people kind of walk, and that is so uniquely identifying, and people not only don't realize that, but they don't know it's being collected. Who knows? Ask people, is your gate been collected? Well, what's that? Like, they don't know. And it's being used. It was the gate data from phone companies, big tech, was purchased by Google and maybe Amazon, and through somebody has a Calico division. I think that's Google, but some medical research group other than Google, and I think it was Amazon. And they bought terabytes of gate data and they used it in the way I just cited. That's how I heard about this. So, re-identifying information is an enormous loss of privacy, and that they're getting that from all this redundant data that they're collecting. So I agree with you.
Mhm.
A big problem. Yeah. So, do you see anything special about Discord, or are they just one of the pack doing the
Uh,
same thing as everyone else?
they're a bit unique, I think, in that they've maybe gotten more trust from their user community than they deserve.
Yeah.
Um, there's an expectation, I think, because of the business model, that is not advertising based. Of course, they are very likely selling data to data brokers. That doesn't seem to be the source of income that they depend upon to exist. It appears that what they really depend upon is the happiness of their user community, falling in love with their favorite private server and sponsoring it. So they give money to Discord, they get some points that they're then able to allocate toward their uh, toward their favorite servers, which again gives the people that are contributing almost clout within that community, because it'll register that they've contributed so much and have so much score within the community because of what they've contributed monetarily, or however they rank it. So that's very different from something like Slack. You don't I think have maybe that kind of following where people are rushing to just give money to Slack to support their favorite Slack channel. So
Right.
targeting the gaming community, they've done very well with that, and from that, I think the fact that it's been trusted by people in the gaming community, who are usually understood to be pretty technically savvy, and privacy focused, even in regards to digital rights management within games, that other organizations are adopting Discord as a discussion platform for open source projects, hardware projects, various other type of non-gaming communities.
Yeah.
And nobody's really going back in and taking a good understanding of how seriously are they taking security. More recent news, again, within that 90-day window of news that came out, was information about Discord contractors leaking information. So, of course, like almost all organizations, outsourcing is a thing. Discord hires contractors. Those contractors sometimes run whole business functions. Um, and they'll get access to a large set, potentially even the entire platform, depending upon the requirements of their function. And that is, they're not Discord employees, but it's another avenue that data can be leaked. And I mean, once a copy is obtained, you never know if another copy was made and where
Right.
the copies went.
No. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know their internal structure. Every company has contractors, as you said, so, and that is a weak link, basically. You don't know what they're doing with the data or how they might be backdooring it. You know, they might want it for their own purposes or be selling it to someone else. I don't know if that's exactly what you're referring to, but just having these unpredictable connections, right? The connection between a contractor and the main company, it's not secure. It doesn't seem that they're running a tight ship. And I like what you said earlier, that they do seem to have a different business model and different users. So they're going to have a different level of trust from the users.
Hmm.
I mean, certainly when I started using it, and it's also a little gamey, like you said, and to me, it seems a little techie. Like it's trying to appeal to younger people that are techie, in addition to business people. So they're the least cautious. They're not worried about privacy. They don't have anything to hide, or they think they don't. And they're going to jump in and use it. And then as they get older, they're going to continue to use it because they're used to it. And there's no one really questioning the underlying bolts and nuts of this company in terms of security. So,
Hmm.
consequently, the keeping of private information. So, what would be your takeaway on this, in terms of Discord or how they're handling this?
Well, I they and how they're handling security, I guess, is one of the more recent examples. It is self-inflicted harm. They are taking actions in a way uh, that just I don't understand it. Specifically, what I'm referring to is the users having to choose new usernames. So the previous username format was, some identifier which was case sensitive. So all uppercase was different from all lowercase, and then you had a four-digit identifier. So you could have 10,000 up to 10,000 collisions, I guess, on a single handle, and it was fine. They were seen as completely separate users, and that's 10,000 collisions with the exact same case. So
Right.
you change the case,
Wow.
you get an even more
Double.
wider
Yeah.
pool. So, uh, but the way they rolled it out, um, it really kind of pissed off everybody. From my understanding, users who were paying members currently seem to get priority um, over those that had been members for a long time or even formerly paying members,
Wow.
but had maybe stopped paying. So there was sort of like those that were subscribed today had a benefit regardless of how long they had supported the organization. So, of course, that rubbed a large part of the community the
Yeah.
wrong way. And also, members who had been part of Discord for a very long time essentially lost their own unique identifier because when they came
Yeah.
up, it was already taken, even if they had been maybe one of the original members. And in addition to that, this was another part where contractors and employees kind of became an issue because they seemed to be able to hand out golden tickets to friends of theirs that would
Right.
allow them to jump the queue and select those usernames. The best explanation I've heard for why they've done this is to flatten out the namespace so that they could be sold and merge with some other platform. You know,
But
this.
and at the expense of their users, especially their longer term ones.
Hmm.
Not especially, but and without any regard to longer term or supporting users
and
or grandfathering. All they had to do was grandfather the current.
and it violates the trust also of a
Mhm.
community, so that they um, again they're used to trusting a certain individual. But now, that identifier is now owned by somebody else. Nobody can really trust who anybody really is anymore because everybody is now getting a new name. It sort of shakes everything up, Everyone sort
Yeah.
of has to reestablish these links in the chain of trust, and there are bad actors now thrown in who have intentionally taken over, valuable namespace real estate.
Yeah. In fact, it gives an advantage to bad actors, which a change should never do that. A well thought out change really, people might not like a change, but the people that are already there should not be impacted in that way. And so what you're saying seems like it was very thoughtless. They just rolled it out and they kind of rolled over their users and didn't give it any consideration at all on how to do this right, you
Hmm.
know.
Poor
So,
execution for sure on an issue that had security implications, and
yeah,
they just sort of it seemed like they were putting the business need first. That I could understand, flatten the namespace. This is a
yeah,
little unique, but
right.
yeah, without the proper care and attention to the finer details of that.
Yeah, yeah, that does seem very flat-footed to me, and not. I mean, it's obvious that big tech doesn't really care about individual users, but do they need to make it so obvious?
Hmm.
That just seems like you are completely immaterial to us. Your happiness, your use, we've got so many users and we're so powerful that we don't care. And that's not how a business should be run at all. And it's not comfortable for the users. Even if that's what you think, you should kind of gloss it over a little bit. It seems like they were a little ham-handed with that. Um, so this is a ton of information and it's really great. Did we hit all the points of the links that that you're gonna provide for us that you've accumulated and put together?
Yeah, I think that had covered just about everything. I don't remember
Awesome.
anything else, any other issues that I had mentioned.
Okay.
Um,
Up.
might we end this optimistically? As I have, like I said, for not using a Facebook account and checking that, but
Yeah.
um, and I give up on using Discord.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Me too.
uh,
Tootsie.
yeah, there's certain things that Instagram, Threads, even Twitter now, um, that they're putting up a paywall to even just see a tweet. It used to be you
I
could see
know.
a tweet and just go to it. Um, part of what I was looking for with that got me investigating Discord was how I might have that same functionality of viewing a Twitter post. Like, can I just go and join this server? I can identify myself to the people once I'm in there, but to the system, can I more or less have a generic identity?
Yeah.
And they don't. It's possible, but it is a hassle. Um, and um, really, if you do anything kind of weird, almost even like go to a coffee shop and there's other Discord users that can trip it up. So they're like, your account, your anonymous account seems suspicious. And so now we need increased
Right.
verification. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not something that can really be depended upon as a way to access the platform. So I've had to make painful decision of this is another social media platform I just don't feel comfortable participating in.
Yeah, and I agree. You brought up a really good point about the paywall that Twitter and a lot of other companies that provide this information that everyone uses. Right, here's a tweet. Let's go see what it says, and it's really unnecessary. And I thought just the other day of what I thought was an example that might resonate with people because generally people don't care. I have an account. I'll just it's already logged in. They don't care. But it used to be, think of television broadcasting, right? The word broadcasting is
Hmm.
spread out. Nobody's television logged on, I guess only because we didn't have the technology. But the fact is that the information was sent out and you received it or not, as you wish. And it didn't matter if you were watching Happy Days or the Danny Kaye show or whatever. What mattered was that they gave the information. Why does Twitter need to know who is logging in to read? I understand to post. You might want to have an identification, or people will post all kinds of nonsense and little kids will get on, and cats will go on the keyboard and put nonsense in. So, okay, I get that. But to read it makes no sense. That is a violation. And they do it, of course, to track what kind of posts do you read? What do you want to see on Facebook? But that serves them and not you. In fact, there's just no reason why everyone can't read everybody's Facebook page and everybody's Twitter and all these things that are behind these paywalls. And the pay, of course, is you logging in. And once you log in, they know who you are and they know what else you're doing, because that information can all be correlated. So it's something that I think should make people go, why do they need this information? And we can leave that open if you're interested in maybe future conversations.
So in response to the TV, really, what you said was true about they weren't watching what you were watching, except if you had a Nielsen box.
I know, I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
And that was a business that was just
Right.
built to collect that data and resell it.
Yeah.
And the users of those systems that were, the people being monitored actually had some outsized influence on what TV shows would go, how much those TV shows could charge for commercials, by, what they showed their support for. And they knew that they were a Nielsen house too, so they
Yeah.
knew they
Yeah.
had
That's
that
true.
influence. But it was always known that that data and that pattern, Nielsen's one of their um, advantages was that their community, although they knew they were Nielsen houses, was, I guess, diverse enough to be useful to make predictions for the marketing people in
Right.
TV.
Yeah.
But now, like, it was always known that data was valuable, and given the opportunity to collect it from everyone, I think it is in the nature of our capitalist business that the businesses, if they didn't collect this data, would not be fulfilling their obligation to their business holders, shareholders, because a business is legally, in the U.S. at least, legally required to put the shareholder interest first, and if it's damaging to society to collect this data and sell it, but beneficial to the shareholders, the obligation of the organization is very clearly in favor of the shareholders.
Shareholders, understood. And I understand what you're saying, but I think there's a couple of caveats. For example, I was asked several times back in the day to get the Nielsen box on my TV. And even back then, I didn't want it. I also remember earlier than the box, I remember getting questionnaires in the mail where they literally pay you $1, but this was 50, 60 years, I don't want to say how long ago. So, and that was something I have $1. But they wanted you to fill out a questionnaire. In other words, they weren't monitoring. There's pre-monitoring. I think the monitoring might have been the 80s or something. And that was enough data. So I understand what you're saying about the companies wanting the information, but I think there's a limit going from coarse grained, which worked for dozens and dozens of years. My dad was actually in advertising on, Madison Avenue. So I actually was privy to a lot of this stuff. And I was always interested in it because it seemed like this massive psychological experiment, which it turns out it was. So of course they need some indication, this show flopped and this show is good. But then they want every detail, what household is watching it, what location is watching it. And okay, that's sort of interesting. They can fine tune a little more. But nowadays it's like what exact individual is watching it and what is everything else you do. And it's beyond what you need for advertising. And I don't think anyone has ever graphed like how much more money do companies make from the very coarse grained data we used to get in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, to the very detailed information they're getting now. Did sales really increase that much? I don't know. I literally don't know. But I would guess that the biggest benefit is from the course stuff And then you getting incrementally smaller and smaller benefits to the point where I think a lot of the detail is utterly unnecessary, whether or not the shareholders benefit from it. And the last little piece I'd say, great information. And the moment you shared it with me, I thought it was a phenomenal amount of research that you had done and put together a very tight case.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. And if you're interested, like I said, it's always an open invite to talk about maybe Zoom or Amazon or other companies that have interesting security issues. So thank you again.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what.
The last thing I want to say is you'd mentioned earlier that you were looking for something optimistic to say. And I think the most optimistic thing that I can think to say is that by getting this information out to viewers and making people aware of something that they haven't thought was a big problem, their privacy or their security using Discord or Zoom or these other things, that it's only really the users that can make a change. And if they don't like this and they use these platforms less or make their opinions known, that'll bring in the change that we want to see, more protection for the individual. So as people become more aware, I think that's a huge step towards reclaiming our privacy. And to that end, what you've been saying is really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.